Welcome to Bajigur with Ronde. I'm Gary Wiryawan, and today we're going to talk about this lens, Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7. Before we continue with this video, this is just a quick reminder to support my channel by liking this video, by sharing this video, and subscribing to my channel down below. Now let's continue with the video. So this is the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7 Samilux lens. This lens was launched way back in 2014, and this is a micro four thirds lens for Panasonic and Olympus. First impression for most people is that this lens has a Leica name on it. Consequently, this lens has slightly better build quality when compared to another lens of its class. Well, that means this lens has a dedicated aperture ring, a tough metal case for the lens body, as well as a dedicated lens hood made of metal that just screams quality. This lens has a field of view of 15mm in micro four thirds, which means about 30mm equivalent in full frame, and it also has a relatively large aperture of f1.7. Because this lens is behaving like a 30mm lens in full frame equivalent, it will perform wonderfully as an everyday easy to use lens with a very usable general everyday use focal length. 30mm in full frame will get you a similar field of view of a regular smartphone's camera, which a lot of people are already familiar with. Other feature that this lens has is that it has a 46mm filter thread that you can use to attach ND filter, variable ND, as well as polarizer filter. There's no image stabilizer in this lens, however it has an AF/MF switch that might be useful for some people. So I bought this lens back in 2017 as my general purpose prime lens that is small, sharp, lightweight, has a relatively large aperture, and relatively inexpensive. The main reason why I need to get this lens is because I need a general purpose prime lens that has a very easy to use focal length that's good for both photo and video. The Panasonic Leica 15mm 1.7 does exactly just that, and thanks to my familiarity with 30mm in full frame field of view, I am able to use this lens comfortably for a lot of different photography and video genre. I use this lens for travel photography, general everyday use, street photography, environmental portrait, event photography, and many other genres. And I am more than happy to report that this lens performs really well in all of those situations. The autofocus of this lens is very fast and instantaneous. The closest focusing distance of this lens is relatively close enough that I can use it for semi-macro shots, and the overall image looks very nice, punchy, sharp, and contrasty. And that for me is more than good enough in the quality department. There's no distortion or vignetting that I can see that's being produced by this lens, and I am very happy to report that the overall user experience using this lens has been very positive. The maximum sharpness of this lens can be achieved at about f2.8 or f4, but I can say that even at f1.7, the center sharpness of this lens is already more than good enough, and any improvement in image quality is just very marginal beyond that point. Now let's talk about the 15mm focal length in a little bit more detail. Now the 15mm, which is equivalent to 30mm in full frame, isn't exactly popular back then in the traditional photo days, because back then 35mm and 50mm are more popular than 30mm. When it comes to real world usage of using this lens, the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7, which is about 30mm in full frame, is actually very easy to use. It is wide, but it's not ultra wide. It is wide enough for most of the stuff that you see every day, for every general purpose photography or video that you need, but it's not ultra wide, so that you can still get a shallow depth of field, and that means that you can concentrate on a certain particular part of the image as you need. However, as with all prime lens, you can really zoom with this thing, so if you need to get a tighter composition, all you need to do is just to move closer to your subject to get that zoom effect. As I said earlier, most of smartphones' cameras focal length is about 28mm in full frame, and that is very similar similar to this lens focal length in full frame, which is about 30mm. That said, if you are very comfortable using your smartphone's camera to compose your image and take the shot, you'll then feel very familiar using this lens because it has similar field of view. Now, to most people, that might sound like a positive thing, but actually, it really depends on how you look at things because this can also be a negative thing. What I mean by that is that if you are not being careful when using this lens to take your shot, your photograph or video might look like it's been taken by using a smartphone because the similarity of the field of view. That means you are forced to be highly creative when you are using this lens so that your photographs or video won't look like they're being taken using smartphone. And I think this is an important point to keep in mind because photography and video is all about creativity. And to me, anything that sparks creativity will be greatly appreciated, and this lens is one of them. Of course, when we're talking about smartphone's camera, the image quality that's being produced by this camera inside the smartphone isn't as good when compared to a proper dedicated micro four thirds camera, but sometimes under the right conditions, some pictures or video taken using smartphone's camera can look as good as a picture or video that's being taken using micro four thirds camera. But I digress, let's continue. Now, there are some negatives when it comes to this lens. As I said earlier, this lens doesn't have any kind of optical image stabilizer inside this lens, so you have to rely on your camera's built-in sensor stabilization, or you have to rely on a gimbal. However, I found out that because this lens is small and lightweight, I can easily install it into a small body like a GX8 or G85 and install it into a small gimbal like this Wiryawan Crane M and do some video works without any problem. And I actually have shot a lot of videos using this combination of setup. So yeah, in conclusion, the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7 Xiaomi is a really good lens. The lens is small, sharp, lightweight, has a relatively large aperture of f1.7 and it's not too terribly expensive even with its Leica's name. If you cannot tell by now, those are all the aspects that I really want from any micro four thirds lenses. Once again, the focal length is really easy to use just like your smartphone's camera, but you have to be really creative when using it so that you get the best result. More importantly, I'm having a lot of fun when using this lens for both photo and video, and I think the end result of using this lens for both photo and video can speak for themselves. Now the question is it worth as a Leica lens? Well, I think with or without the Leica name on this lens, I will still buy it because it's a really good quality lens that will serve you in a long time. Now that is all for today's video. I hope that you find this video to be useful. Please don't forget to support my channel by liking this video, by sharing this video and subscribing to my channel down below. Thank you and goodbye.